This past week, a member of our shul told me something that was so interesting, so compelling, so unexpected. It has such deep implications for our world. And I had just never heard it before, that I've been thinking about it all week ever since. The context was that I was teaching a number of couples from our new learning group initiative about the Seder, about Passover, getting ready for the holiday. And the question that I teed up for this group of families was that the Haggadah tells the Passover story with a certain arc, with a happy trajectory. God takes us from bad binaries to good binaries. God takes us from slavery to freedom, from sorrow to joy, from darkness to light. And so let's sing Hallel to God, who saves us from bad and takes us to good. And I asked this group of families, is that our arc now? Do we, in March 2021, have the luxury of going from a bad binary like darkness and suffering to a good binary like light and joy? And if not, what language would you use? And that's where the conversation got just so very interesting. One participant offered that the vocabulary she would use, the moral vocabulary that she would use to take in where we are now, is the language of a moral awakening. That the legacy of this year must be a moral awakening. That the legacy of this year must be that we are all more aware than ever of all of the political and economic and social and racial divisions and disparities, which have real consequences for the health and the length of life and the wealth and the quality of life of our citizens. And shouldn't the legacy of this year be a moral awakening where we all commit to create a better country for all of our citizens? Well, another participant said that would be great. A moral awakening would be great, but he doubted that that would happen. And then he shared the observation that was just so compelling to me. He said that he had been going through his high school American history textbooks, and he wanted to know, what did those textbooks say about the flu pandemic in 1918? And the answer is nothing. And then he reread the magisterial tome on American Jewish history written by Jonathan Sarna. What did that book say about the flu pandemic of 1918? And the answer was nothing. And his comments inspired me to go over my own books. I was an American history major in college. I still have my high school textbooks and my college textbooks in my office at Temple Emmanuel. And as soon as this conversation was over, I looked through my books. And what is said in my books? Answer, nothing. Nothing is said about the flu pandemic of 1918, even though it killed 675,000 Americans, even though it killed worldwide 50 million human beings. Nothing is said in any of my books about the flu pandemic of 1918. And as I looked at what was not said, as I looked at what was not covered, the only thought that could come to my mind were the lyrics of Barbra Streisand's classic song, The Way We Were. What's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. So it's the laughter we'll remember whenever we remember the way we were. And in fact, what got the energy in life and what got the press in the textbooks were the roaring 20s, not the flu pandemic of 1918. And so this participant said, based on that history, how the flu pandemic of 1918 seemed to have no impact on the society thereafter, but it was about the roaring 20s, he would imagine that a far more likely outcome than a moral awakening is stasis. We just go back to what was. We just go back to where we were. We used to travel, we'll travel. We used to eat out, we eat out. We used to get busy and immersed in our own lives, we'll get busy and immersed in our own lives. Equilibrium, not moral awakening. Well, I've been thinking about that conversation ever since because, of course, both voices are absolutely right. The participant who argued that the legacy of this year should be a moral awakening is, of course, right. As a society, we should not let this tragedy go to waste. We should take this tragedy and invest it in our country so that we have a better country. A moral awakening feels like the right move, but of course, this other participant is also right. Equilibrium feels like the far more likely result. She's right, and he's right. And when I thought about that in this moment, we need to hold both moral awakening and equilibrium and stasis, I realized that the narrative arc of the Haggadah, that we go from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light, from a dark place to light, that somehow does not take in the complexity of where we are right now. So I was talking to Michelle about this dilemma, that we need a new move. We need a new way to conceptualize this moment that we're living in. And all of a sudden, Michelle's face just brightened, and she smiled, and she blurted out, Kohelet was wrong. And I said, what did you say? And she said, Kohelet was wrong. And I said, what do you mean? And she then explained that the words Kohelet was wrong are words in a poem that is one of her favorite poems by the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai called A Man in His Life. So what is it that Kohelet, that's Ecclesiastes, we read that book on Sukkot. What is it that Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, says that the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai thinks is wrong? What it is that Kohelet says that Amichai disagrees with is his most iconic statement, that to everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven. And then Kohelet lists a bunch of binaries, the most famous of which is there is a time to laugh and a time to cry. The message of Kohelet is that you laugh or you cry in separate moments. You laugh when you're happy, or you cry when you're sad, but separate moments. And Yehuda Amichai comes in and says, not complex enough, not nuanced enough, not layered enough for the hot mess that are real people leading their lives. And what Amichai argues is that we need to be able to hold on to conflicting emotions at the same time. We need to be able to be happy and sad at the same time. He says that we need to laugh and cry with the same eyes. And when I read the Amichai poem Michelle gave me, laugh and cry with the same eyes, that in the same moment, the same person living the same life can be really happy and really sad, really laughing and really crying, really feeling like there's a light at the end of the tunnel and feeling really deeply broken at the same time. I thought Amichai takes in where we are at. His poetry is our way to frame time. I will just tell you, as when I read that poem, I thought to myself, I laugh and I cry with the same eyes almost every day. I have a 92-and-a-half-year-old father in Jerusalem. He's alive. He's lucid. He's now fully vaccinated. I laugh. And he's been living all by himself in a small apartment for a full year. And recently, he slipped and fell and broke his hip and had to have surgery and has been dealing with post-surgical pain. And Shira and I are just so far away. I cry. And laughing and crying with the same eyes. I just hear that from so many people, so many voices. You know, this year we were blessed with a grandson, our first grandson. I laugh. And would you believe it? I've never held my grandson. In a single year, I've never held him. I've only seen him on Zoom. I cry. And now I'm vaccinated, double vaccinated. I'm going to hold my 1-year-old grandson for the first time Saturday night at the Seder. I laugh and cry at the same time. Or I have aging parents. They live in a different city. And I've been Zooming with them all year. And the minute that I was fully vaccinated, what I did, I got on a plane to go visit my aging parents. And they're alive. I laugh. But when I looked at my mother, and when I looked at my father, and when I hugged them both, I realized how they had aged in the past year. And it struck me, I Zoomed with them every day. But you can't pick up aging on Zoom. You can only pick up aging in person. They've aged. I cried. And I had a very meaningful visit with them. I had to come back to my life in Newton, to my family in Newton, to my job here. So I had to say goodbye to them. And as I sang goodbye to them before the cab took me back to the airport, they looked so old and fragile and vulnerable. I cried, laughing and crying with the same eyes. And I've heard 24 versions of this. Wow, this next week's Seder, I'm so looking forward to it. We're going to have people on that Zoom call that I never would have done Seder with. I laugh. And around our table, actually, in person, there will be 3 people. And it always used to be 33. I cry. Laugh and cry with the same eyes. That's where we're at. Now, if we own that, if we own that what Yehuda Amichai says is right, that we can be genuinely happy and genuinely sad in the same moment, that we laugh and cry with the same eyes, I think that's a really good thing to own, because I think it confers 2 very big advantages on us. The first is it gives us the benefit of realistic expectations. So much of the pain of life comes from a discrepancy between expectations and reality. And if we have the expectation that we get to leave the land of darkness and go to a land of light where there is no darkness, if we have the expectation we get to leave the land of sadness and go to the land of happiness where there is no sadness, then we're cruising for a bruising. But if we get that some pain always comes with, if we get that some darkness always comes with the light, if we get that some sadness always comes with the happiness, if we get that some suffering always comes with the celebration, then when it comes, we know it's coming. We've accounted for it. We're not shocked. We know it's coming. We know the darkness is coming too. We know the sadness is coming too. We're here. We're here. We're here. We're here. We're okay. We're here. We're okay. I get it. I got it. We're here. Still here. Knew it was coming. I feel it. I'm okay. Our mixed expectations will only be confirmed by our mixed experience. But here's the other thing. When we have a mixed experience, when we laugh and cry with the same eyes, that is a call to action. What do I do so that I can laugh more? What do I do so that I can cry less? After all, folks, we do have some agency here. We have some agency here. We cannot manufacture the perfect life, but we can tweak a better life. What does better look like in our life? And how do we make better happen? Kohelet was wrong. There's not a time to laugh and a time to cry. There isn't. There's only a time, the same time, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, and at the same time to work with the same hands to build a better life and to build a better world with these hands. And that time is right now. Shabbat Shalom.